Hello everyone, I'm Carlo Celio, and I first came to California in 1853 from Switzerland by way of New York City and the Panama Isthmus. I was tempted by stories of gold, but I found another kind of treasure when I finally reached Lake Tahoe, then known as Lake Valley.
I hope you're referring to me when you talk of another kind of treasure, Carlo. Good afternoon, I am Maria Celio. I was a widow, also from Switzerland, living in Lake Valley when Carlo and I met. We married 2 years later.
Actually, I was referring to the fact that Lake Valley was the first place in my travels that reminded me of our Italian area of southern Switzerland. But you also are dear Maria.
Okay, yes.
After all, you gave me 6 wonderful children.
I did. Our children, we had Frank and Arminio, AJ, George, Charles, Benjamin, who we called BC, Henrietta and their children. They were such a help to our businesses. We never would have been so successful without them. I only wish our 2 other children hadn't died very young.
Yeah. I spent the first few years in California mining for gold on Clear Creek near Pleasant Valley. Between there and Coloma, I managed to get $300 worth, $8,000 in today's money. Use that to buy 800 acres for dairy farming, halfway between here and Plymouth. It's along the old road that links all the gold towns. Highway 49, I think you call it.
And Carlo, he used to drive supply wagons between the Placerville area and the old mining towns in Nevada so he could earn money to support that first dairy business.
In Switzerland, we graze cattle on green grass at high altitude meadows, and then when we bring them down the mountain for the winter where the weather was less harsh.
We would. And the reason that they did that was that it made the butter taste better. And we thought that the Placerville and Lake Valley areas were the perfect place to do the same thing. I understand that there's some in Switzerland who still raise their cows the old way, herding them up and down the mountains.
That's right. So we built 2 ranches. Excuse me. The one in Lake Valley we called the Summer Ranch, and the one down the mountain, the Winter or Home Ranch. We raised cattle for beef and dairy cows to make butter to sell.
And every year, the entire family, the men, the women, and the children would drive the cattle and dairy cows between those 2 ranches. We'd go uphill in June and downhill in October. It was a very big job.
It was. It was. The trails were steep and windy. They were difficult to traverse for the wagons and the cattle. It took 5 long days one way just to, because the cattle were so slow, 2 miles an hour. The men would rustle the cows on horseback.
They would, and the women, we would mine the younger children in the wagons that were filled with clothing, food, supplies, pots and pans, mattresses, small furniture, really all our belongings. We even had chickens in cages.
We did. So in June, we would start the trek again, head up 49 to Placerville, where we would drive the cattle right up Main Street. The merchants learned to board up their fancy picture windows when the Celio cattle drive was around.
Those dirt roads, it was quite a dust storm. So after we passed through Placerville, we would stop at 6 Mile House in Camino, Riverton, Kybers, and Strawberry before we finally arrived at the Summer Ranch. And it wasn't an easy journey. Sometimes there were thunderstorms or snow flurries.
Yeah. We would get up early in the morning, middle of the night, like 2 a.m. and saddle the horses to round up the cattle by kerosene or just in the dark, and head on out again until it was dark.
At 2 a.m., the women and the children would gather wood to start a fire and start cooking the breakfast. We never hit the trail without a good breakfast. Just getting ready for the trip was a lot of work. I would bake for days to make sure we had enough food to take on the journey.
So the months at the winter and summer ranches were anything but easy, but they were especially hard for the women.
Yes, that's true. We did raise the children, but we also planted and tended the gardens, cared for and butchered the poultry, and constructed, mended, and laundered all of the clothing.
Don't forget the cooking. You had to split the wood into kindling and keep those wood-fired stoves burning while the chicken was frying or whatever. 10 other things going on.
Well, pioneer life was not easy, especially for women. But most pioneer women, they would make one journey in a covered wagon in their lifetime. But we Celio women, we did it every spring and fall until 1948, when California law required that cattle be trucked.
You guys were tough. In 1903, we were doing well enough that we acquired the town of Myers. Came with a hotel. It included a dining hall and saloon. There was a store, cooperage, ice house, blacksmith, and some other buildings.
We renamed the town Celio Station. But as you probably realize, everyone continued to call it Myers, which is a sore spot with us, I can tell you. I think it should be called Celio, don't you?
Definitely. So in 1905, I formed a corporation, C.J. Celio and Sons Incorporated. And we were the largest employer on the south side of Lake Tahoe with 75 employees. I was the president.
And our children also helped in the corporation. Frank ran the beef and slaughterhouse business, George ran the dairy business, BC ran the lumber business, and Charles ran our businesses in Myers. Henrietta helped keep the ranches going.
Our boys married and brought in 5 hardworking women to the Celio family. AJ even married into the Myers family. A lot of good that did. Still no Celio Station. No. We had 12 grandchildren, which were helpful on those cattle drives. And Henrietta stayed single.
She did. Now, I had passed on by the time Frank married Amelia Gemini, but I know I would have liked her. She was a hard-working woman. She never wore trousers, as women were starting to do in those days when they were working. She would just pull on her boots right under her skirt.
Amelia had a talent for working with wood. In fact, most of the furniture at the Winter Ranch she built. There was a bed, a dresser, some cabinets, all milled from wood right there on the property.
And there's still some tables, chairs, and benches that Amelia made that are in use today. After I passed on, she eventually became the matriarch of the Celio family.
I died in 1918 at the age of 85. And I think that you and I left a fine pioneer legacy for El Dorado County.
I agree. I passed on in 1890 at the age of 57. Now, that may seem young, but at the time, the average lifespan for a woman was only about 48 years.
I remember when we laid you to rest here in January of 1890, thinking that this was a real fine example of a Victorian garden cemetery.
Yes, it was beautiful then. Thank you for visiting us today and hearing a little bit of our story.